AI is a reality. It is a big elephant in the room. I'm quite disheartened that there is so much of pressure to put everything under AI and then try to monetize it. This AI has to serve humanity.
What superpower would you choose to have?
I think self-awareness is something that I sometimes believe is in short supply, and if I would have had that more and more, I would have done better and better.
And then what's the one thing you're most excited about for the future?
India. You see, we have so much. We have just got to put them together, and it's going to happen. This is our century, and this has got to happen.
Good evening and welcome to yet another edition of Thinkly Talks. We are in conversation with Professor Mukherjee, a seasoned leader with over 40 years of work ex in manufacturing, procurement, and global supply chain management. Professor Mukherjee has led major complex projects such as the $6 billion Novelis acquisition by Hindalco and has also managed procurement for 35 plants at Lafarge Holcim, among many other such projects. With that very brief introduction, welcome to the talk, Professor Mukherjee. Great to have you here.
Thank you.
So much to unpack. I mean, I think on the areas of global supply chain, procurement, the complexity in today's business, also sustainability. I think that's something which is very close to you. So, but I think before we go down that path, just tell us a little bit about the early days, about your education, the value systems that you kind of grew up with, and how did you go about making the career choices that you did?
Right. So I think I almost owe entirely all of this that you said to my parents and to the education. And to start with, it was my father, of course, kind of imbibing in me the conscience and the consciousness, both the things which are so important. And maybe my mother brought in the practical side of things. And then, of course, when I look at it, very humble beginnings with my grandfather, with 11 children that he and my grandmother had. And then, of course, my grandmother brought in some of the early thoughts around self-sacrifice and, I mean, looking at the world through the veil of ignorance. That is something I picked up, and not really advancing your self-interest first, but looking at through a very different lens and not your lens alone. But I think when I look at my education, I was very, very fortunate that I went through all the best schools in Calcutta, starting with Birla High, and then St. Xavier's College, and Jadavpur University, Presidency College, and Indian Institute of Management at Calcutta. So those were very good. But at the end, I think my best of the best universities were the shop floors of Philips, where I started my career, learning about what very simple things can be made into really constructive, or highly complex things can be done with very kind of ordinary people. So the whole journey of doing things from ordinary people and converting ordinary processes into something outstanding, that is something that I learned from the shop floors of Philips as well as Indian Aluminium Company. So that's what I can talk about in a nutshell about my initial days.
Right. You made a passing reference to John Rawls' veil of ignorance, and so is that something that kind of stays with you whenever you make decision making? Do you always try to look at what's really the right way, to kind of make this decision making process? Maybe you could just linger on that.
Absolutely. I mean, whether you call it the theory of justice or whatever that John Rawls kind of proposed, but the fact remains that it is a large cake with which you are working.
Yeah.
There are many stakeholders. I learned this during my days where we had the financial crisis and Europe was so much they were really at a very, very bad stage. And how do you look at all the stakeholders, not really the ones which you think are the important ones? And that I think has gone down well in my career.
Right. No, great to hear that. If you were to kind of look back at the 38 years of your career, what would you say would be some of the defining moments? And in that, maybe you could touch upon, let's say, the mentors that have crossed your path, maybe some of the values you already touched upon that, but maybe a little more. And also, what are the kind of challenges that came upon, which made you take the choices or really discover the best in yourself?
Right. So I'll start with the mentors, and the first mentor that I can think of in my career was Mr. Dasgupta. Mr. S. Dasgupta, he was the plant manager in Philips. And I had just joined fresh from college, and on the very first day I met him, and he gave me something very new, which I was not taught in the college. And he said, look, son, if you want to look at how businesses are run, You can't just simply add some profit from some figment of imagination to your cost price and say this is the selling price. It's the other way around. You see, some of the controls that you have on the selling price may not be there. It's market driven, and you have to deduct your cost to get to profit. And this was something of a new learning for me. It was, I think, my first days in Philips were a baptism of fire kind of an experience. And I was put to many of the initiatives around quality and productivity, learning from the people on the shop floor, which essentially thereafter, when you see the privatization and the liberalization that sort of started to happen from 1991, 92 onwards, and Philips was heavily disrupted by all that.
Yeah.
And it was a great learning from me. And thereafter, when I went to Indian Aluminium Company, which was an Indian arm of Alcan, and there was this managing director, Tapan Mitra. And this was something that I can never think of, that he put so much of effort to see that a person who has come from outside of aluminium, how can we train him up and teach him and on the rolling processes and see that he gets the best out of all the experts that they had in that system. And including sending me to the Alcan rolling program and so that I could pick up stuff. And not only the technical side of the story, he saw to it that how can you make a leader understand and get into the intellectual part of leadership, you see. He used to give all these very difficult papers on economics and management, including the ones like Economic and Political Weekly, to my boss, who was the plant manager, and he used to give them to me to read, and I found time to read them, and I developed my habit of learning through those. And how can you self-teach yourself to understand these things, how you can explain the world. So these, I think, were some of the defining moments. The touch points that I developed with some of these leaders really went a long way in building my understanding of things in the business. And so therefore, whenever later on I kind of got straddled with complexity and difficult problems and challenges, I never felt any problem in approaching sometimes seniors, sometimes juniors, anybody who could come up and help me sort those issues out. And this is something that came in from these mentors who taught me how to do this.
It's amazing, in, let's say, the hundreds of the podcasts that we've done, I think one common theme that always emerges is, most of the leaders have been really touched upon by a mentor or somebody who really, wished the best for them, right? And I think everybody kind of is, what should I say, is always kind of giving them the benefit, giving them gratitude, saying that, had this not happened, I don't know where I would have been, right? And it's amazing how sometimes things just seem to be like that, right? Or maybe people are just being lucky, right? So what do you have to say about getting a mentor in someone's life? I mean, how does one really go about seeking it? Like in your case, you encountered two gentlemen who had a profound impact, but what would you really talk about that to, let's say your younger colleagues or students now?
So my sense of mentorship is that, see, the mentors are all around you and you have to find them. There is never going to be a situation that somebody is going to send a mentor to you.
Yeah.
And that's something, and maybe I was fortunate that I had those kind of people around me, including the managing director of Hindalco himself, Devu Bhattacharya, who puts you into all the challenges, the most difficult challenges, and you have to figure out how to find solutions. And he's always the helping hand out there. So my sense is to the students and to the young people would be that you look out, you watch for the people who are those who actually make the best out of individuals, who really work hard to make an individual become better. And those are the best mentors, and you can easily find them, and which is what you should look at.
I think just actively seeking them out is a simple, mantra.
Right.
Talking about the challenges, and if you look at your profile, I mean, I think first of all, global supply chain has to be probably one of the most complex business that there is out there in today's time, and we'll talk a little more about that. But I would imagine, leading and then handling the post-merger acquisition of the $6 billion acquisition of Novelis during a Hindalco would probably be one of your most challenging terms, right? Maybe if you could just double click on that a bit and just kind of help us understand the scale of the challenge that you had And more importantly, how did you the post-merger culture integration? How did that come through?
So this was a project. Before talking about the project, let me say that the story behind all of this is that I suddenly got a phone call from the MD of Hindalco, Mr. Bhattacharya, in 2006, early 2006. I was then the plant manager of the oldest plant of Hindalco in India, which was the Belur plant. And I was shocked. He said that you just pack your bags, and the bag has to be a big one because you will have to spend the next months in Mumbai. And I didn't know what all this was in store for me. And then he said that this is a Novelis acquisition. And imagine that the next one full year, not months, but one full year, I spent almost 7 days a week and worked with a very small group of people, because in that acquisition, you can't have too many people working, then everybody would know about it. So it was a very small
Right.
group of 3 people from operations. Entire operations had only 3 people. And then, of course, finance and legal, etc., to look at the other aspects of valuation and the legal aspects of it. But the first job was to establish that what are these assets? What value do they bring in? And how can we extract the value out of some of these assets, which we were finding that the numbers were not portraying. And that is the time that we came very close to looking at entrepreneurship. And this is Mr. Birla at his best and he was not that, he was what, in his 40s, very early 40s. And he already had the thought process so clear that what he wants to do with this acquisition of Novelis and how he's going to use the downstream and make it one of the most dominant kind of global assets on a base which is out there in every continent. And think of it that you are essentially at Hindalco, which is an upstream asset, and your downstream is several times of the business of this upstream. And essentially, we didn't have the bandwidth to sort of look at from an end-to-end perspective such a large body of assets. So it was a big challenge for us to really understand. And once we gave the go-ahead on the green signal to Mr. Birla, that these are really good assets and these are really good people, he built his vision around them. Together with Mr. Bhattacharya, you see, when you look at it, 6 billion, it's a very big number, but then we had a multiple of 6 over its kind of underlying or its long-term EBITDA potential. At those days, we thought it would be $1 billion of EBITDA that we can generate in 5 years' time. So it's 6 times of that.
Right.
But you know, today's EBITDA of Novelis is double of that. And all the investments thereafter have come from the internal accruals. It's not from any money which has flown in from Hindalco or from other investors. So the issue is that you think of this, first of all, the strategic rationale. You have a small group of people working on it, and then it is entrepreneurship at the end and risk-taking. Nobody would have thought of taking such a big leap. But then when you think today, after almost more than a decade or even much more than that, what you realize is that you are taking a leap into something unknown. But then your principles are intact, and principles are absolutely on a very sound footing, that you have the right asset, you have the right people, and you have to chart out the path together with them. That's what he did. And he did not make too many changes. He did not make huge changes, etc. He allowed the leadership to evolve from those people, which is something that we rarely see today, you know. So in effect, this is a great story of believing things and then risking it out. And he has been successful in many other such acquisitions and later on integration. And his way of integration has been to allow the people to take leadership. And it is not that you impose leadership from outside. So that's how it has been.
And how did how did really Hindalco manage the entire cultural issues that would be there, you know, with a different company, different entity, that always, and this of course was a cross-border thing, right? So how did, you know, any thoughts on that?
See, the issue is that we never wanted to integrate and create one single entity with one kind of aggregated culture or something like that. It would have been a disaster, in my opinion. So he kept the downstream as it is, and he kept the upstream very separate from the downstream. It's one of the crucial defining moments that I can see for this ensemble to keep themselves apart and not look for how we can forcibly create synergies, you see, or find
Right.
a common culture where actually such a common culture doesn't exist.
Right.
So that's how it has been. It's very different.
Right. Again, we were talking about some of the themes, and there's a very interesting theme that typically when the Indian companies take over other companies, they show a lot more, may I say, respect to the company which is being acquired. I think like there's a very, of course, stereotype Western way, which is that you have a 100-day plan. You kind of come in, take over the company, and then you just kind of try to airbrush it with your own culture, and then it's back to trying and kind of incorporating it, and that's not really happened. And when you see, let's say, the acquisition of Mahindra's, or for that matter Tata's, whether it was the South Korean company or whether it was JLR or the Chorus, I think one thing that really seems to have stood out, and I think by your example also, is that Indian companies have never really tried to come in and kind of take over the culture. It's really about respecting and trying to bring the best out of that. Would that be an accurate assessment, or any thoughts on that?
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. I mean, Indian acquisitions are generally very different.
Yeah.
And the reason I think is about in the nature of the values that these leaders actually they stand for. And this is about respect. It is about finding out what is best and not imposing things on others. And
Right.
sometimes the best can come from those people. Maybe the conditions of the business were not right, and that probably uh, kind of created those situations. But you can still do with those same people. And if you want to make change where really drastic change is necessary, you do it. But then you should first be willing to sort of understand that business and go about making those changes thereafter. And that's how it has been. And it has been a successful model. If you see the number
Right.
of such acquisitions that Indians have done and the percentage
Right.
of successes, that's
Right.
probably on the high side.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. I think respecting the culture begins with that, in that sense.
Exactly. Exactly.
There's an interesting comment here from Viren. He's saying, what have, just based on you're talking about novelists, and say, what have been the most pivotal moments in your career that shaped your approach to leadership? I would imagine novelists be one of them, but, maybe you'd like to expand on that.
So my approach to leadership, or later on in our discussion, we would probably delve into it further to understand the whole evolution of leadership and how we have looked at leadership. My sense has been that it is about respecting change. It is
Mhm.
about looking at the world that needs to be just not be interpreted and analyzed, which I was very strong on, and that was
Mhm.
one of my forte, to analyze the world and interpret the world and find the solutions that is needed. But it is not that. It is about changing it. It's like what Marx said. The philosophers have interpreted the world in many ways. The point, however, is to change it. You see, so it's about the change that you bring in, and sometimes you see it's risky. So I felt that it was a great risk for me to kind of move from one to the other and take those risks. But and these are very costly, of course, at times. Some of the leaders I've seen have faltered to change, and it happened with me as well. And so that's one of the things that I learned. And then, of course, I looked at many things during the course of my career, and I looked at the whole journey. And I was very fortunate to work in several parts of the supply chain, which is something that we will discuss later. So that is
Right.
something that I see, that you should be willing to make the change. You should be willing to take that step. And that's something which came in my career. I got almost parachute dropped in every situation. There was
Mhm.
a plant in Mauda. I was parachute dropped into that plant just after acquisition, or I was parachute dropped in Europe in a very different setting, and then I got parachute dropped in a setting in Hirakud in Orissa in a completely different background. It's a very remote location, 5,000 people in the plant working, and how do we drive change over there? So how do you make those? How do you adapt yourself, understand the situation, and then you're willing to take the risk? Because at every moment you have to make change, just not interpret and solve problems. That's how I
Right.
look at it.
Professor, you ever thought about putting this together as a 100-day template or a toolkit for people?
I think it needs to be done. You
Yeah,
should be proactive enough to understand that you don't have too much time.
yeah,
A new leader put into a situation like this would
right.
need to have a toolkit and a plan of action. And that's
And it'd be
how,
great.
yeah,
It'd be great to see you put together something. Would love to, maybe a book, maybe another book from your side, or maybe a long format essay would be interesting on that.
very good point you raised. I have the habit of writing, so I would try to do that.
Right.
Thank you for that suggestion.
Lovely. The shifting gears a bit, and really doubling down what probably has been your, your functional area, which is procurement and global supply chain, right?
Right,
Uh,
right, right.
COVID has shown us that how global and how fragile our supply chains are right now. I mean, the COVID shock really brought the world trade to a halt. It really impacted foodstuff, manufacturing, chemicals all across the globe, right? In a way, so what has been your takeaway from that? I would say maybe 2 years of disruption in the supply chain. Any observations about that?
So I was in the thick of things then. At that point of time, I was CPO. I was handling a large outlay of buying, and we were at the center of COVID. And
Mhm.
as luck would have it, I was actually in Wuhan in October of 2019. Who would have known that 3 months from that time,
My
we would
God,
have
that's
such a
as close
serious,
to
as close
ground
to that.
zero.
Yes, yes. Because Wuhan was our headquarters in Holcim, China, and we
Okay,
used to go there.
right.
But what thereafter I saw was leadership in action, you see. And this is something that I learned absolutely like hands-on, that our leader was the Holcim CEO. He foresaw and he saw things so much in advance. That's outstanding. In the month of March 2020, when the rest of the world knew nothing about COVID, he canceled not only the annual program in March, which used to happen in Davos. He said that we are not going to have it this year. We may not have it next year. How could he say that? And that put us into the action. And then he provided huge amount of direction. Instead of looking at the company as a global company, he said we have to go local because the problems are going to be local. How things will disrupt and how things will pan out is a local issue. So I think what COVID did was that in supply chains, the global supply chain started to look inwards, started to look at local solutions. And that
Right.
is how the solutions started to emerge. You see, who would have thought that Wuhan, being a center of all the electronics and electrical components that get into the car, the supply chains crisscross through Wuhan, and that disruption in Wuhan would have set the ball rolling for a global disruption in automotive. And then
Mm.
you go into the chip disruption. Who would have thought that chips, which are used by so many industries, and automotive never thought it that way. They thought that these are the parts suppliers, and there was never a situation where the Toyota CEO ever met a chip making CEO. Can you believe it? And then things started to change thereafter. There were, of course, some leaders like Tesla and Elon Musk who thought very differently. And the way he configured his supply chain is a case study by itself. And they got actually disrupted the least. So how is it that out of all those disruptions, when I look at the top 25 supply chains of the world, and I've tracked this 2021, 2022, 2023, the best
Mm.
supply chains of the world actually performed better. Can you believe it in those disrupting situations? So they
Yeah.
found solutions and they were far more proactive. They had systems in place. They had supply chain designs which were better. So they were far more so-called proactive and resilient. That's the word. So the word resilience today has found its meaning. And
Mm.
you can see that how do you create resilience in supply chains? That is the subject matter of today. And you see digital twins and all that stuff now finding its way through.
And what do you think are some of the changes that are coming as a result of this whole COVID impact? Like for example, in some of the businesses, the whole story about China plus one policy has become more heightened, more urgent than in others. Similarly, I mean, any of those thoughts? Also, of course, about building, like you said, building the local supply chains, right? So that in case of geopolitics scenario, and I think we are really living in some crazy times to have maybe three wars running right now parallelly across the world, right? So what do you think are really some of the transformation that you see happening at a strategic level?
So at a strategic level, I think what is important is to find suppliers and uh, your capabilities that is going to take you through in those times of crisis. And I've seen this happening that whether you call it China plus one, which is what Apple started with, and now it is China plus one, plus one, plus one. So that's how they have tried to build their supplier base. And it is always a case that you have to learn very fast. And they had no shame in sort of learning very fast. But then recently, my visit to Japan opened my eyes to some of the things where things can be done very differently. And it's the approach of this made in Japan kind of a concept. They are stone's throw away from China. That's what
Yeah.
Japan is. But try to find out a made in China item in any of the shelves, they're just not there. And so when you see these jewels of Japan, from the Mitsubishis and the Sumitomos and the Itochus and the Mitsuis of the world, they are in the process of making their supply chains such that if I don't have the raw materials, that's fine. I'll get the raw materials, but let me create the expertise for producing the final product. Now, this is a very, very different kind of an approach. And many of the advantages that India has gets frittered away when we do not have an approach like this. And we think that we can get things from anywhere and we can just sell things to anywhere. And that's not something which gives you a competitive advantage. So that's also something that needs to be seen. But again, all said and done, the convergence of many, many things, which you can call it as technology initiatives and stuff around supply chains and IT stepping in, and then today AI stepping in, it's been a huge change in the way that we see how supply chains work. They are currently on-demand systems, which means that any changes in demand can be run through the entire chain, and you have the visibility and the transparency to go through the entire chain to find solutions to those changes in demand. And the more and more you're able to become, you can offer many varieties of products and you can increase on customization, is stemming from the fact that you can create those design solutions to such things in the supply chain. And on the other hand, you have to also reduce costs and have the suppliers, strategic sourcing, etc., to be also out there to help you out in that journey. But it is a convergence of many things that we have all learned from COVID, and we have to really look far ahead into the future and create the right designs for your supply chains to be successful.
Right. You're going to touch upon two very important themes, which we'll try and unpack. One is about technology, digital transformation. There's some questions here about that. And second, of course, the one which is very close to our heart about the India story. And I hope we don't lose out on the advantage. So we'll touch upon that. But I just wanted to double down. When you look at global supply chain, I mean, in one way, you could think of it as a relentless pursuit for efficiency. It's really a pursuit for either cost efficiency, cost competitiveness, or product efficiency, trying to get the best product at the best price, right? And therein you have this huge thing where you've got tankers moving across the ocean. You've got all these movements happening. You have this global trade that's happening. What do you think? Do you think this is really coming at a cost towards sustainability? I'm just trying to say that. Do you think it's a trade-off, or do you think actually it really doesn't matter? I mean, some thoughts from you, because I know sustainability is also something that you've really talked about, in the past. So would love your views on this.
No. I am a great fan of sustainability, and I learned sustainability entirely during my stay in Switzerland. It is about caring for things around you. It's as simple as that. And then it starts with, think of it. I mean, when you say sustainability, it sparks off many thoughts in me. I think of it that which is the country which has the maximum amount of water availability per capita. And Switzerland is one of those countries. Water availability per capita is so high because you get water from the glaciers, which gets collected in those lakes. But on the other hand, they don't fritter it away as an advantage. They end up with the lowest capita per consumption. Consumption per capita is the lowest in the world. And how do they achieve this? It comes from the responsibility for the environment. And think of it, there are simple ways of doing this. You have an incoming tariff for water, which comes to your household. You have an outgoing tariff of water, which is for the water which is being released from your household as waste. Now, if these tariffs are reasonable and it captures the cost, it serves both the ends. The people who are actually putting the water around and it also serves the purpose of reducing the waste for the people. So that's the way that a supply chain needs to be thought of, and it needs to be on a sustainable footing. It can never be that you can keep on sourcing things from anywhere in the world and keep moving things because the logistics costs have all gone down.
Yeah.
And taking that bandwagon of logistics costs being low, which has come from making these big ships and massification of ships and moving them at a speed which gives the lower cost, and then you can stuff as many containers as possible. On the other end, you end up creating huge amount of bottlenecks on the inward side and on the outward side. Finally, at the end of the day, all these costs move to the consumer. So it can never be that you can come out of it. So creating sustainable supply chains has got to be the area of attention for all. And it cannot be just saying that I'm reducing some emissions, etc., which is essentially greenwashing. It's far more serious than that. It's about thinking of your entire business model. It's got to be circular. And when I look at this circularity, it tells us that, look, we have to be local, because the moment you sell something and you look at this circularity, from where are these things that are going to reach the end of life are going to be taken back? They are going to be in your markets where you serve those consumers, you see? So the connection with the consumer is going to be of enormous importance. You can have a great global supply chain, but at the end, the consumption will happen in those end-use markets. And from there, those inputs have to be recycled. So this is the new paradigm of change. And I mean, this is something which, of course, was started by Toyota with their design of a car, which has got to be serving the purpose of entire recyclability of every item in the car. And today, of course, this is the norm that you can, and people are saying that I want the tires which have to be sustainable materials. That's what is driving today Bridge North entire business to create solutions so that you have completely recyclable material in the tire, and the tires cannot be 100% recycled that easily. So you get to create new solutions through maybe synthetic tires and have other methods and avenues of reaching that. But this is how our approach to materials, approach to every resource has to be thought of to find solutions in that area.
Fascinating stuff. And it's amazing that when you look back, let's say 20, 30 years, there was this whole theme at that point in time about globalization. I mean, in your management schools, in your management book, was all about globalization, and it was all about the fact that the transferring of the competitive advantage of nations, right? I mean, you have the Western world, which is, let's say, the manufacturing hub, and that moves, let's say, to Europe as this economy kind of becomes stronger, and then that eventually comes down to Asia, because ultimately the cost competitiveness is not there. So that becomes more a services, industry, and this becomes a manufacturing. I mean, we've all seen those typical, diagrams then, right? And then now you have, suddenly after 30 years, something like the USA trying again to become the hub of manufacturing, right? You have the incoming president who's put that as a stated goal, that he wants to bring in manufacturing jobs back into, he's going to be looking at putting in 25% tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and the like, right? What is the view about this world order? I mean, it seems to be literally a 180 degree shift from what we kind of grew up in, from the early days.
No, you're absolutely correct. And what Trump is trying to do, and he initiated that in his last, in the earlier term as well, was to change behaviors. And it is about changing behaviors of our industry, of our people, including all the economists who are gung-ho about any kind of zero tariff, etc. But on the other hand, what has zero tariff given these countries? Yeah. Most of the work in manufacturing has fled those countries, you see. So it's about changing behaviors and of the people that, and then I again go back to the Japanese model, and they achieved that with zero tariff. They had maybe somewhat of a non-tariff barrier, which worked in their favor. But whatever it is, what you're saying is absolutely true, that you can't simply move products and services out of your country to be produced somewhere else. And then you think that you will have logistics in place to bring all that out back to your country. And that's the way things would be. So it's a new way and a new order. And I think it is in the right direction, because after all, at the end of the day, it is the people that you have to finally serve as industrialists. Our job is also to see our country, our people. And we cannot just simply have a blind eye to that.
Right. In fact, maybe we'll bring this in now because, while I wanted to double down on this a little more, but, we talked about, how do we really kind of work towards the benefit of not only the company, but also the country. And I think geopolitics in its new avatar is really front and center now, right? The polarization of should I say, the parties, the left and the right, has become far more visible, right? And you have this whole tugs that's happening on really what's going to be the initiative of each and every company to try and kind of meet up with the cycle. So, to this, there's this question from Anand Sharma, which just says, hello, sir. What's one leadership skill you think everyone should develop, no matter the profession? I think in this rapidly evolving world, and I mean, there's no singular trend. You're seeing cross tensions happening. You see, sometimes things moving backwards. Maybe you could probably double down a little bit on the leadership that's required in this time.
So this is absolutely the question that I was looking forward to, that what is the kind of leadership that you require in this time? And I will take it and with focus on India.
Yeah.
And fortunately, of course, India has got the tailwinds in terms of the population, the growth in population, the demographics behind it, the demand drivers being there, some of the resources being available, which helps us. And so therefore, we are in a very kind of a unique position, I would say. And this is definitely the current leaders and industrialists are looking at how to kind of create attraction around that. But what I see is that the leadership that we need is to create the self-reliant India. And I can point this in many of the areas. The first is the focus on skill building. If you're talking about one thing, well, let me talk of three things. One is about around the skill building that we need in India. And skill building could be even the artisans or the, let's say, the carpenter or the person who is going to work on some electrical problem in any plant or that's the kind of skill I'm talking about. It's the apprenticeship. It's the kind of skills that I've seen in Switzerland. In a canton, they have only one carpenter or a one painter or a one gardener, because that is of such a high skill. You don't have too much of supply. And you have such a high skill that serves the best. So that's what kind of skill that I'm talking of. And skill building is something that industrial leaders have to look at. What is the current skill? What is the future skill that I need? And am I really moving my people in the right direction? So this is what I look at as the first thing. And the second is, of course, is the deepening of your supply chain, the deepening of your value chain. You cannot simply have one part of the value chain and be very happy about it. If you're on the downstream, you stay with the downstream. If you're on the upstream, you stay with the upstream. It's a sheer waste. And today, if you see why China actually is winning, is because they operate in the entire value chain. And they say the deepening of the value chain, which means if you take aluminium, for example, the deepening of the value chain means that you go to more and more of the downstream products, which will keep on adding value to your upstream aluminium. And so therefore, this is where the employment is going to be generated. You see, it's not just in the upstream. The moment you get into all the kind of products that you can make out of it, and you supply that to the people in end-use markets, that's where the maximum employment is there in aluminium. So that's the second area I see. And the third area, which is again going back to his question, is the character building of the industry. You see, the industry must have a character. If you look at our great leaders in our industry that I have seen, whether it is Tata, Jamshedji Tata, or Ghanshyam Das Birla, and though they were the people who created the character of the industry, they had thought about that we must have a purpose. We must have a purpose of building the country, you see. And that's the way. And this is my learning from Japan as well. Those five jewels that, can you think of, that Mr. Warren Buffett has dumped shares right, left, and center, including of Apple. But he has never dumped. In fact, he has kept on increasing his stock position of these five jewels of Japan. And what would be the reason for it? Because he believes in certain measures where they stand out. And he believes in the measure called net worth. And that net worth is not a figment of imagination of the market. There's nothing to do with that. It's the real net worth of the company. And some of this net worth comes from the character of these assets and the things that they build with this leadership that they have. It's about building the country. There's something like that.
Lovely. And what does a country like India do when we have, some kind of a dependency when it comes to energy in that sense? We Also, for example, the rare earth metals, that's become a bit of a geopolitical 4D chess game that's happening around the globe right now. Any thoughts about that?
So this is an important area that if we have to become, let's say, self-reliant on energy or produce the EV battery materials, for example,
Right.
those materials are not there for sure. And China also doesn't have many of them. But on the other hand, they are getting into the process of tying up with those people so early.
Yeah.
You will find the Chinese in Chile and the Chinese in South Africa, the Chinese in Australia, and they are so much before the others. And they are already tying up with those capacities for the next 10 years. You are already too late.
Right.
And so we'll have to think about how to do that. And China is never in conflict with these. And we may write anything about them. I'm not a great supporter of China, but I don't see any conflicts with them as far as business is concerned. And they tie up with these people with those contracts. And then they create the processing industry. You may not have the raw material, but you can do the processing industry. And that's a difficult area. That's not an easy area. And then you build your entire value chain. So that's how it should be. But you're right that in energy, and if we have to build our pipeline in terms of the electrical, which is going to be on the renewable basis, one part is solar, and solar cannot be that we keep only making the solar modules, whereas we are not on the entire value chain from the ingot to the cell. We have to be strong in those areas, and at the end, it is all starting from the silica and the silicons, and how can we put our expertise around that is where our focus has to be. We have to lead the entire value chain. So that's how we can win.
Right. And I think it's great to see India taking at the sovereign level some initiatives on the chip manufacturing, because that's the new, may I say, the coal or the new oil in that sense, right? Because you have to be, again, you have to really try and be the entire, the value chain out there. Of course, we obviously can't go all the level, let's say, to TSMC, but at least at the higher level of chips can be manufactured in India so that we reduce our dependency in case of a geopolitical shock that really, is happening, right?
No, that's a very, very important step, and India has done the right thing.
Yeah.
We have been late maybe, but we have
Very
done
late
the
to the
right
party.
thing. We have done the right thing, and we
Yes.
should not only make the chips, which is at the end.
Right.
We should also try to see how we can go through the entire value chain, starting from the polysilicon, and the chip grade polysilicon is not a simple matter. So we'll have to get there and do all that stuff. But we are in the right direction, because this is something which is going to give us a commanding position in the future. Because if you have to lead the world 50 years from now, it's going to be AI, and it's going to be solar. So in both these, the starting point is finally going to be the semiconductors and the silicons, and we better be there before the others.
They're going to be the force multipliers of the next year.
Yes.
And on point, there are a couple of questions here around AI, and there's from Meera. She's saying, "Hi sir, how do you see AI transforming leadership in the next decade?" And there's Amav Shinde who's saying, "How do you drive digital transformation initiatives in legacy organization with deeply ingrained traditional practices?" And I'm kind of just conflicting the two, because it's in a way related, because you'll have some of these industries which tend to be very, very legacy without really the penetration that you see of AI. So any thoughts on something like this?
So first of all, the leadership that we have to provide in this area, and AI is a reality. I mean, this is there. It is a big elephant in the room. Maybe it's a powerful force. In the last 3 years, we have seen a culmination of many things coming to fruition with storage systems and the computation speeds, and 100 billion transistors put into a chip has given us enormous benefits. And then look at the GPUs taking over the CPUs, which gives us also the power of computing. So all of this has happened all at the same time, and I would say a convergence of things. But at the end of the day, I'm quite disheartened that there is so much of pressure to put everything under AI and then try to monetize it. And that's where the focus and approach is getting. But on the other hand, this AI has to serve humanity. So I think the leadership position that we need is to get to the bottom of it, to find where AI can serve humanity. And there are hundreds of areas where it can do. And one of the areas, of course, to start with is healthcare. And the solutions are, we still don't know. Think of the Living Heart Project, that we want to simulate the heart and or any other organ in the body. Or let's say we want to treat cancer, and the conventional methods are failing, whereas AI can find the hidden trends and the things that are required or simulate much better with algorithms, and it keeps learning. AI, the beauty of it is that it is constantly learning and adopting and adapting, and it is creating a better solution every time. This ability to do this is enormous. So why don't we figure out how to use them for the betterment of humanity and the betterment of things, instead of looking at stuff which humans can do? And if leadership can make this distinction between the two, then we are home. So that's how we can make this distinction and move ahead. So that would be my way of looking at leadership and AI.
I think with a lot of initiatives happening at the AI level, with the chips manufacturing happening in India, we're probably maybe half a decade away, but at least the work has started. And also, I think as a nation, we've not been so close to, let's say, nuclear energy as a source. Unlike, let's say, Germany and US, where they've actually had multiple plants closed down because of, fears of, contamination and exposure and stuff like that, right? I think even if you're kind of late to the party, I think we can still probably catch up on all of this, let's say by 2030, 2035. What do you think about that? Do you think it's a possibility?
Oh, surely, surely. See, the thing is that we cannot have any progress around the thermal coal and use of thermal coal to create energy. So that's something that it's I think it is now a done deal that India is not going to get into that. So how are you going to therefore, let's say, double your energy output? If that's what you have to do, I don't see that we can keep ourselves away from the nuclear part of the story. So that has to come in, apart from the things that we are doing in solar. It has to come in, and it has to come very fast. In fact, Mr. Trump, he's talking about it in great details, that look, you're talking of these data centers requiring so much of energy, and where is this energy going to come in the United States unless you get into very seriously into nuclear? And so I think this is a turning point for India as well, to look into that aspect.
Great. There's a question here from Siddhi, I was asking that I wanted to know what's the most exciting tech trend that you're keeping an eye on? I would imagine AI, but I leave that to you.
So the tech trend that is very important for me, especially in the domain of supply chains, is to look at the progress around digital twins. So look at a supply chain which has a huge amount of volatility on its demand side, trying to produce many products through many customization. And then you are working with not only a physical chain, but also an online kind of a situation where many requests have to be worked on. How do you optimize all of this? And you need to simulate and find solutions on a basis which needs to be very fast. You can't have latency problem. You found a solution, but it's too late. So that's where most of the systems through which we work, on top of it, we require a digital twin, and then find out how you can simulate all of these things and provide solutions, just exactly like the Living Heart project that I said, or let's say the simulation of an aircraft. You don't need to really drive an aircraft. You can simulate the whole thing in some form. So that's where our focus is. It is still early days. All the solutions are yet to be there. But then this is something that I keep my eye on to see how we can, because I was working exactly in that area with finding solutions using algorithms, the quintic algorithms in Europe, several years back in 2008. And we had the latency problem. By the time we took to do a nightly run and find the solution, many things have changed. And during the entire day, you have a whole retinue of things getting changed, but the optimizer has got no clue to that. It's only got to be after every 24 hours that you are giving a snapshot of the data. That has changed tremendously. And that is where I follow this, and this has got huge implications in many other areas as well.
So Professor, when let's say when you would hire a high-performing team to do a task, when you were, involved, how did you really go about putting it together? Because I think the kind of skill sets required, it seems to be extremely diverse. One is, if I may call them, the legacy supply chain guys who are like added, right from procurement to people who are doing the sourcing. But now you have this whole trends happening on, let's say, AI. you talk about digital, you talk about the other initiatives, people who can kind of look at technology and see how it can impact, right? How do you kind of put together? Because obviously the job description seems to be very, very evolving in that sense, right?
No, you're very right. That see, if I take the example of procurement, the entire procure to pay process, P2P, a large part of even source to contract would be done by AI and by platforms which will interact with each other. There are going to be buyers and sellers and things which will work around partners coming together to solve a problem, and you can seek solutions through those. You're not going to have people working on it. So any function, whether it is procurement or other parts of supply chain, the people have to work on those areas which AI would not be able to do. For example, the strategic area of work, which even today, at least we think that AI has not entered that. So this strategic area of work and the skills that you require in those are about a future and not about the current. You're working on 1 year hence or 2 year hence or 3 year hence as to what kind of products, what kind of buying that you want to do, and what should be your partners in those. And that's where you have to work on. So it's very clearly that a distinction is getting made. And where do you think all this work around AI in supply chains is going to be directed to? It's going to be a natural corollary that repetitive tasks are going to be done by AI. And it's not going to be by people. It's a completely valueless work to spend 80% of your time in procurement with things where the supplier is not there. You see, it's a repetitive internal tasks and internal stakeholders whom you're satisfying, maybe converting a PR to PO, but you're not really spending your time with suppliers or development or value engineering or things like that. So that's where the skills have to be directed. So you have to make that choice and the distinction and go about it in every part of the supply chain.
I think before we kind of move towards a close, would love to just put you through a rapid fire, been put together by the team out here. And I'll just kind of, just kind of give you some questions and just, you can just react to that with one or few words, right?
Okay.
So one technology that you can't live without.
That's social media. I would not be able to live without social media.
All right. You think it's a boon or a curse?
Both.
But it's probably kind of tilting towards giving benefit. That's the reason you are probably
absolutely. I cannot live without X. Can you imagine that I follow maybe 80 different people, and through that I learn how the world is behaving rather than relying on a newspaper or any other media.
That is so true. I think the mainstream media unfortunately seems to be losing its relevance, especially with powerful platform like X out there. True. Favorite city for business travel?
Zurich, because I had stayed there, and later on Holcim headquarters was there, and I used to go there, and this is a marvelous city.
Right.
And so that's how I would call it my favorite spot for business travel.
And leisure travel?
Leisure travel would be many places, and of course, the current visit to Japan opened my eyes to how beautiful a country can be.
It's a beautiful country. Yeah.
It's just not the geographic part of it. It's the people.
The people there.
Amount of respect that you will get, the amount of help that you will get.
Right.
And it's amazing.
Yeah, they're from a different planet. I mean, if you really think of it.
Yes.
Yeah. In fact, by the way, if you love Japan, you should try South Korea. I don't know if you've been there.
I've been there because we have our plants in South Korea.
Yeah.
So I've been there.
It's beautiful. I mean, it's another
absolutely.
What superpower would you choose to have?
I think self-awareness. Something that I sometimes believe is in short supply, and if I would have had that more and more, I would have done better and better.
What's something you've always wanted to try but never have?
This would be my ability to play chess and have the inclination and mind towards that kind of a game, and that's something I could never master that. Something.
But do you follow it? Are you following the Ding Gukesh?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. I mean, I'm really excited what's going to happen today.
Right.
He went one up yesterday.
Yes. Amazing. After so many draws.
Yeah, insane. Reminds me of the Karpov Kasparov, matches, if you remember, of those days.
Yes.
Which would have 20 draws and then something.
Right.
Through. Yeah. Favorite book on business or leadership?
I think Mandela's book, Long Walk to Freedom. has
Yeah.
been a kind of a book that really transformed me. The time that I read it in 2006,
Mhm.
and just after it came out, and I think that was amazing, amazing book to read.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you could instantly become an expert in something, what would that be?
Expert in something, it would be probably how do I find my next five moves? So, which is about thinking far more strategically.
Right. 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 So that's a superpower that you really want, huh? Being able
Right,
to, in a way,
right,
be prescient or just kind of look into the future in a way. I
right,
think.
right, right.
Right. What's your favorite genre of music?
It's Western classical, Beethoven, Chopin,
Oh,
Mozart.
nice. Lovely.
Yes,
Lovely.
yes.
And
I used to play Western classical piano, of course.
oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Amazing. And what about your favorite book?
A favorite book, I mean, there are a whole lot of it. I would say The Idea of Justice by Amartya Sen. It's one
Hmm.
of my favorites.
Hmm.
There have been many others, of course, at this point of time. The whole series by Harari itself is a great,
Yeah.
great
Yeah.
read, right?
Have you read The
Sapiens.
Nexus?
Yes, yes, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And what about science fiction? I mean, I'm just curious. Have you?
I have not, maybe that's another uninitiated area for me, science
Yeah.
fiction, probably. Yeah.
You should try the Asimov series on of Foundation.
And that is a great name. I know about that, but
Try that.
never read
You'd
that.
love that, especially because it's like a game of chess over 1,000 years. You'd love that book. Considering what you talked about. Your and then what's the one thing you're most excited about for the future?
India.
Lovely. I think you should double click on that and tell us a little more about what's on your mind.
What's on my mind is to see that, look, we have so much. You see, we have so much. When you travel, and I've traveled to 35 countries, which is, of course, not a lot, but then I see that we have everything. We have got the nature behind us. We have got the geography behind us. We have got the resources. We have so much of people, and then we have the skills and expertise. We have just got to put them together, and it's going to happen. This is our century, and this has got to happen. And
Yeah.
this is irreversible. It has got to happen. I'm optimistic.
Yet, you do get disappointed. I mean, even if you go to a supposedly a weaker economy like Thailand and Vietnam, the cities are much better planned, cleaner. It looks like you're in a foreign country, so to say, right? I mean, it is really disappointing, right? When you kind of look at the streets of Mumbai, Calcutta, Bangalore, you know, what do you think is really missing out here? Where are we missing the bus?
I think it has to start with myself, or it has to start with us. It has to start with the individual. Nothing can be done by governments and industry alone. It's about us. Because at the end of the day, what you see in Japan is that there is no dustbin, there is no waste bin anywhere in the country.
Yeah.
You have to take care of everything. So
Yeah.
it has to start with us, and so therefore, uh, I don't have an answer at this point of time. I don't want to be pessimistic at the end.
Right.
Let's remain optimistic.
Right. No, wonderful. I think this was, an amazing hour spent with you, Professor. Any closing thoughts that you'd like to share with the people who are listening to you live or in the recording?
I think one of the things that I wanted to talk about in the leadership paradigm, which I said that is about risk and all that,
Right,
and
please.
thereafter there were a few thoughts that I could have taken it forward with.
Please. I think we would love for you to double down on that. Please
Right.
go ahead.
So the leadership part, as I have seen my mentors and leaders,
Mhm.
and some of the people that I see who are great success stories like Elon Musk or people like Buffett. But think of it that the first thing that one must look at is, of course, to start with the constancy of purpose. Whether you look at Martin Luther King Jr. or Mandela or Gandhi, etc., and of course, the Indian context, we have those examples from leaders like Ghanshyam Das Birla or Tata. But then, when you step into the nitty-gritties of leadership, then the first thing which is talked about is delegation, right? And the way we have looked at delegation is very different from how I have seen and I have interpreted delegation from some of the leaders that I have worked with. And it is about, first of all, the ability to know things much better and go to the details of the things and really think of Musk and his SpaceX and his involvement in the design of SpaceX and his involvement in the entire design of all the Tesla cars and even in manufacturing. It's got to be that you need to lead by actually learning it yourself first.
Right.
You see, and even with Buffett, for example, he will not go by what his advisors are saying. He's going to read 500 pages every day. So, and then the Herculean effort which is required to become the master of something, and this mastery will come from the labor that you will put in, the hours of toil that you will put in. I remember this very small incident with my boss, Mr. Devu Bhattacharya, who was MD of Hindalco, and we took this flight from Mumbai to Atlanta. And it was, by the time we reached, it was so late in the evening after 22 hours. And I was telling him that, okay, so we'll meet again tomorrow. Let's call it a day, etc. He said that, oh, you think my day has ended? I'm going to start my interviews now. Oh. And then he told me a story about it, that he saw this in evidence with Pranab Mukherjee. And he went to meet him, and he was the finance minister one day at 11 o'clock in the evening. And he was very apologetic to him. And he said that I'm really, very sorry that come so late. He said, you don't have to be apologetic because you're not the last man. And so these are examples of the sheer effort that we put by leaders. Nothing happens just by chance, you see. And then the third one, which I look at leadership, is the ability to recoup, to recover, to be resilient, and not take things and because leaders, they fail so many times. They repeatedly fail. And because that ability to recover and recoup and find the solution again, and that is something I've seen in many of the global business leaders. Tim Cook, for example, the way he has done it is remarkable. The moment he saw that things were wrong in that his beautiful model that he built, which is a global model with an overhang in China and all the benefits that he was deriving, he quickly changed that model in days. See, so that's another area about the changes that you can do very fast, and the risks are all about that, how fast you can make those changes.
I mean, I'm just guessing, but Tim Cook would pretty much be right up there when you think of a global leader, right? I mean, the kind of the global supply chain that he's been able to put together, is really awesome, right? I mean, or is there somebody else you really admire?
He is my main mentor in supply chains. He is the guy. Can you imagine that he did his industrial engineering and thereafter his MBA from Duke, and then he joined and he became the CPO of Compaq. In those days, there was no designation of CPO, but he was the head of the central procurement team. And from there, he got recruited by Steve Jobs into Apple in 1998. Right. And then thereafter, he has changed the entire business of Apple. You see, we may think that Apple is so valuable. Yes, it is valuable because of the innovation. But the bottom line, the 50% value add comes from the Tim Cook supply chain.
The last 10 years is literally his supply chain. That's
his supply chain.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, the S24s of the world are similar priced with similar features.
Yeah.
Same features, same price. But look at Panasonic's, look at Samsung's value add, which is at 20-25%, with the value add in Apple at 52%. That's the difference he brings from the supply chain. So it's simple to understand.
And they're sitting on the biggest cash pile ever. And it's going to be interesting when they decide to deploy it someplace. So, so he has anyway got his future secured through that cash pile in that sense. Yeah. No, but fascinating, Professor. It was wonderful talking to you. We have gone beyond that. Thanks so much for staying on so long. I really enjoyed our conversation. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. And it has been a pleasure for me as well to interact with you and your questions.
And would love to have you back on the pod sometime. Yeah.
Thanks.
Have a good one, sir. Bye-bye.
Bye.